The Dane and Derek Show is an uncensored, unfiltered podcast. Content warnings can be found in the episode description. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dane and Derek. My name is Derek, and this week we're discussing OSRs, Old School Revival RPGs, role-playing games.
Yep. I'm Dane. We are both lovers of tabletop RPGs and nothing else this week, so let's get into it.
Yeah, we're diving right into it. Old School Revival. So that's...
Derek, are you super familiar with these?
So I'm not as familiar, but I understand where they come from. But I'll go ahead and give me the lowdown.
Okay, so OSRs, Old School Revival, is a movement in like the tabletop RPG space. Kind of in the same way that there's like an indie movement and a story game movement. The OSRs find a lot. They're basically just like, they're throwback people. They love like first edition D&D. And so a lot of their games are what they call like retro clones, wherein they're basically what's the way to put it? They basically take like Gary Gygax's like original D&D like books and booklets, and they'll more or less they'll just like brush them up. They'll rearrange them and like make them readable because they're kind of messes, if we're being honest. So they'll just organize it for like readability, understanding rules, like all that good stuff. It's pretty cool on just like from like a from a standpoint of someone who's played all that and like an archival standpoint. There are also some other games like Morkborg, for example, wherein it's original mechanics, but very much in this vein. There are also some like overlaps. So like I think it's the Black Hack.
Yeah, the Black Hack, Mecha
The Black Hack is very much like an overlapping of the indie space with the OSR space. So it's kind of like Dungeon World meets first edition D&D. And then there's some that are like Five Torches Deep, where they basically just turn 5th edition D&D into an OSR game. So we're kind of dancing around it a little bit, but the thing that they're really trying to get at, more than the rules specifically, like they're not like, yeah, for some people it's really about like the old first edition style rules. What they're really after is the experience of old school tabletop gaming. Which is like way more about like the dungeons and like
the dungeons
solving
and
traps.
The crawls.
Yes, the dungeons and the crawls, and like for a lot of people, like their introduction to like D&D now is like a Critical Role or an Adventure Zone that is very, very story based, even though they're using 5th edition, like pretty relatively crunchy rules. Whereas where the OSR people are like very much, they're like, our characters die all the time. We have backups. They're very much, it's very lighter, much lighter on the role playing in terms of like a character style. It's very much about like going on an adventure, and delving deep and like getting treasure. And it's not also oddly, it's not as much about fighting monsters. Like it's really about exploring dungeons, for these people. And so it's a lot about like reviving, what's the word? Like specific, rulings and ideas, like make tracking like torches and things, because it's very much about like resource management and darkness and all of this stuff. So like it's much more nitpicky about these things, but like it's also very much about it is about the dungeon crawling. Like it's super, there's not a much better way to explain it, but it's like it's about finding traps and finding clever ways to go about them. Like most of these systems actually have way fewer like skills and stuff. So like if you want to, like, for example, if you want to disarm a trap, you actually have to like come up with a way to disarm it, and you need a tool that you have. So like inventory is really important. And typically like you don't get much XP for killing monsters. You get way more XP for like bringing back treasure.
I've heard it.
Oh, go ahead.
I've heard it described as like role playing through the decisions you make as your character versus role playing based around like a backstory and a character and a goal. It's like my character has a 10 intelligence. I can't metagame through that, right? My character's really good at
Mm-hmm.
punching things, so I'm going to punch my way through this trap. Or I'm the party rogue and I have like a really high intelligence. I don't know why intelligence is the space stat I go to, but that's like, I think, like the easiest way to explain the kind of like decision making process. Like you could play like a character that is incredibly unwise, right? And is constantly tripping traps or is a little bit too greedy, right? Like the decisions come from the stats and the sort of generative aspect of the resource management.
Yeah, and also there is a side of it where they play way more. They play in a much more metagamey sense,
Yes.
um, wherein like your stats are helpful, but like having a 10 intelligence doesn't mean you can't come up with a clever solution.
Right.
Like you're not hampered. Like you are still a player.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like it's very interesting style. And there is something that's a little bit more game like about it. Um,
Uh-huh.
but it also tends to lead to these like very exciting stories that people tell of very clever solutions. Another thing to note in these games is like, unlike in 5th edition D&D, wherein your character's kind of just a fantasy superhero, like by the end of like your leveling arc is in 5th edition,
Right.
you
You're
can
pretty
like basically
powerful.
slay gods, like that's,
Yeah.
you're fantasy Superman. In the OSR tradition, like nobody ever gets that strong.
Right.
Even at like the strongest levels, you're still pretty squishy, so you have to like come up with like clever solutions. So it's very much there's something kind of like puzzle solvy about it, and like
Yeah.
about like clever solutions. And you've played a fair amount of advanced Dungeons and Dragons, right, Derek?
Yeah. So second edition is where I learned how to play, and I played that pretty much growing up, like elementary through middle and even in high school.
Yeah. And
And
advanced D&D is well
second
within the
edition. Yeah.
OSR. Second edition
Yes,
is
it is
well
very much.
within OSR.
I think a lot of OSRs pull from that because,
They
like,
do.
so just like some mechanical differences for those who don't know. Like in old D&D, you would have to roll under a certain stat basically to hit someone. You had a thing
Yeah.
called Thaco to hit armor class 0, and basically they had like a Thaco score, and then you would roll, and then you would like do all this math and subtract and have to roll under. I think a lot of OSRs have simplified it to where
hmm
it's like the stat is just the number you have to roll below on a d20, which is way easier to like do. And
Yeah.
like, when you take a minus, you subtract from that number. So like, say you need like, I've only played like Mecha Hack, which is like a hack of the black hack.
hmm
But like, for instance, like if you are going to overcharge your laser, you need to, and you fail your check, now you have a -2 to systems. Okay, now your systems went from a 10 to an 8. So the next time you make a systems check, you have to get below an 8, which is much
Much
harder
harder.
than, below a 10. So in a lot of ways, it makes sense, right? Like a natural 1 becomes a critical hit and a natural 20 becomes a critical fail. Um,
Yeah, the mechanics feel a little backwards to like a lot of what people are most used to, because the third edition of D&D kind of flipped a lot on their head.
yes, that's where
And
the
I
whole nat 20
think,
comes in.
yeah, I think from like a approachability standpoint, I do think that third edition made some really good choices that are a lot more intuitive.
Yes.
Some streamlining that's just been refined in fifth edition down to like a nice, clean system. I will say, I think the OSR stuff is really difficult to approach. It feels very esoteric. And also, I will say that the aesthetics of the OSR, this sort of like weird
Oh
70s,
yeah.
sort of trippy, sort of like lo-fi weirdness, fantasy art and stuff,
Yeah.
not super approachable. It kind of gives off like
No.
punk rock metal vibes of like, this is like a club and either you're in or you're not, and it is tough to get in.
Yeah, I mean, if
Um,
you Google like the original Conan Barbarian poster, that's like a great example of like the kind of art and the kind of vibes that these old games kind of have.
yeah,
They're
absolutely. And
very much like these like, yeah, like these like hyper. I guess, like masculine and feminine and like
There's something
sexual.
oddly ugly about it too, and I mean that just in
Yes.
like just not that pleasing to look at.
It's gritty in
Um
a way that you don't expect.
yeah, yeah. Whereas like I think the fantasy aesthetics somewhere in like I think I want to say somewhere around as a result of like the Lord of the Rings um kind of got prettier if
Yes.
something
Yeah.
elegant got put in there that even like
Especially for the movies, yeah.
yeah,
Like you look
yeah.
at the difference of like 4th edition and 5th edition art versus like 3rd edition art, and
There's a
there's like
transition. There's a
definitely, yeah.
you can in 3rd edition you can still see like the remnants of the old stuff, and like by 5th edition it's got that like very much Peter Jackson Tolkien
Yeah.
take Peter Jackson's take on Tolkien's style of like elves are like Galadriel and whatnot, right?
Right, yeah.
And I think that is much more approachable. And so yeah, OSR is kind of like it's kind of like I would describe it as like punk rock D&D in a sense.
Yeah,
Like
like you really have to want to be there, and you really want to have you really want to be in the mosh. Like
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like
like you want to go to the show, but not just the show. You want to be in the mosh.
yeah, totally. And I've been like kind of like diving into like OSR YouTube lately just because it's kind of fascinating.
Huh.
Like
Like Matt
I don't
Colville stuff?
kind of yeah. Um
Or
more
like
adjacent, but
more
like
Jason? Okay.
yeah, the one I got kind of hooked on was Questing Beast. But
Huh. I'll have to check that
the
out.
the yeah, the interesting thing like that I kind of come to with it is that um in playing it or playing around with these ideas in my head, like I think about it as like, you know, a lot of people you and I played uh D&D with in high school would have loved OSR.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's way more about like a lot of the people we played with were not 100% comfortable with like the role playing side of things, and they just kind of wanted to do like the dungeon crawl and then slowly over time let their characters kind of emerge and then care about
Yeah.
stuff, right? And
Right.
OSR is amazing for that, like amazing for
Yes.
that. And so I think about it, I'm like, man, I kind of wish I'd known about this, you know, back in high school. I totally would have run this for people. It would have been great.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think
and
yeah, no, definitely. Go ahead.
but it's definitely just like it's a line of thinking, and there's like a lot of it that I want to bring into games I play in the future. Um,
Mm.
just because like I think that there are some really good ideas in there around like problem solving and how to handle like difficulty, which is to basically be like, yeah, some things are going to be too hard and some things are going to be too easy, and that makes combat dynamic and interesting. Enjoy, you know, like
Yeah.
versus like one thing, like the idea of like getting XP for treasure, well, not exactly the realm I'd want to go. I do like the fact that that kind of like incentivizes combat to be thought of as like not the ideal thing. Like a lot of D&D campaigns, because character advancement is locked behind killing shit. Um,
Yeah.
it incentivizes your characters to be like
Murder hobos.
murder hobos. Yeah. Um, Whereas, like, if treasure's your goal, it incentivizes your characters to be greedy sons of bitches instead,
Oh,
which is a
yeah.
very different problem. But like, I was like thinking about it, like, okay, well, what if you offered XP for killing monsters, um, bringing back treasure, and like clearing levels of dungeons, um, you know, and maybe even like have the characters have like a character goal that when completed they get XP. You know, like
Kind of like a roguelike.
kind of, yeah, just being like, hey, look, there are these different ways in which to get experience, and any one of them is viable. It's just, you know, you probably kind of need to do all of them. And it means that
Yeah.
like if you want to talk your way through a combat encounter instead, you're not losing out on anything for doing that. You
Yeah.
know, in fact, you're probably gaining something because, you know, like in this same system, you would also be like, you are not generous with like long rests in 5e, right?
Right.
Um, and like the thing that I really like about the OSR scene is the idea of like thinking about the game world as a as something, as not like not gearing it around like a story so much as like this is a place where you guys get to come hang out and play, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
And I haven't played in many campaigns or adventures like that lately. It's all about like, and for better and worse, like I do think that like the Critical Role Adventure Zone Friends of the Table style of play is pretty dominant right now.
Yeah.
And that's super cool, and I love that stuff, and I wouldn't want to give up a lot of what that's brought out for anything. But also, I do love when it's like, yeah, we're all here and slap down a map and like, what do you guys want to do tonight? You know, like,
Yeah, no, I definitely it's funny because I think, like, when I think about a game that I don't get to play in often enough, it is exactly that. I don't get to play in a
mhm,
game where you just kind of get to dungeon crawl, and I think for me, a lot of it comes down to, like, certain games with certain amounts of rules exhaust me, but I
mhm,
still want to dungeon crawl even if the rules are a little less intensive.
yeah,
Um, because I was looking at using an OSR for a group that I was, like, looking at doing a game with that was very much in this vein of, like, dungeon crawling, and I think it's just, like I think for a lot of these, like, yeah, they feel very hard to approach, but having just that map and knowing that, like, to quote Dungeon World, right? Draw maps, leave blanks.
yeah,
But this is more like draw maps and hide things. I think a lot about how you used to put sticky notes on maps for where we hadn't gone,
mhm,
and
yeah,
I very much like that. Um, and like I often wonder, right? Like, there's a lot of games that lean somewhere that's like D&D light and more story oriented, but I
mhm.
wonder if you can get like D&D light and be more dungeon crawl oriented.
I would say honestly, look at Five Torches Deep for that. Um,
Mm,
Five Torches Deep is really good for like, it strips away a lot of 5e down to just like, here's what you need, and this is
yeah,
about going dungeon crawling. Um,
yeah,
it's I think it's really cool. But in that same vein, you know, like I kind of am like moving back into this idea of like five playing a little bit more 5e and a little bit less in the indie scene, and kind of changing what I'm looking for
uh huh,
around a bit. Like if I want to play something in the indie scene, I might actually want to like kind of leave Dungeon World or like Quest by the wayside and be like, no, I think I'm gonna play Fall of Magic or The Quiet
yeah.
Year. Just being like, nope, we're just going completely off. We're gonna go to the other end because what I want to do is I want to play like a storytelling game,
Right.
where it's
You're
all about the
you're
characters.
yeah, you're honing in on the very specifics of what you're looking for.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I don't have like the core group with which to dive into like an OSR with. You know, like I don't have those people. And
Yeah,
I'm
you'd
not
have to
sure I want to go.
assemble a team.
Yeah, like I'm not sure I want to go into the mosh pit if I'm being honest. Um but maybe I want like a little bit more of a punk rocky like pop punk, maybe pop punk.
Ooh,
Like take
yeah.
some ideas and play some 5e with people, which is also one thing I'm also remembering about 5e as I'm kind of coming around back to it is like, yeah, you know what? It's kind of nice to just be like, I don't have to teach a damn thing. Like
Yeah.
you know
Everyone
how to
knows how to
play it,
play the game.
you
Yeah.
know how to play it, and also there's so much support for it.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing I'm looking at is like, how do I keep playing games while I'm in law school, um, when I don't have as much time? And the answer kind of has been modules,
Yeah.
wherein it's like, yeah, we're sitting down and we're gonna play an adventure, and my job as the dungeon master is I don't have to prep. I need to like read it and be ready, but
Right.
I don't need to come up with everything. I just need to tweak it to make it work
Yeah.
for the characters and for what I want to do, right?
Yeah.
And since I play mostly at distance with people, there's like pre-made like fucking roll 20 prep stuff and I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah.
love that."
Yeah.
And then just like put in some OSR stuff and some like the best of the story story game movement things to just be like, here, we can have a really nice time with all of this. And you know, like I think something that OSR really acknowledges that some of like the story game stuff doesn't is like the OSR acknowledges that this is a game. Um, you know,
Yeah.
like they acknowledge that like you need to be able to put it down. So like OSR games typically have like kind of rules around like, yeah, you can't really end a session in the dungeon. You need to be in a safe haven together or someone dies. You know,
Yeah.
and so like it's kind of built around being like we played a session together and then it ended and we all get to go home and it's not like left on a horrible cliffhanger or any number of things, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I'm really appreciative of all of that. And
Yeah. It's
you know,
definitely
I
nice. Like
yeah,
there was something I was listening to a podcast with Sage Latora and Adam Blankenship.
Kobo?
No, not Adam Koebel.
Oh no.
Different Adam.
Okay.
Adam Blankenship, I
Different Adam.
think. Yeah, designed a different game. I forget which game. But they were
Mm,
talking about how like games shouldn't feel like you're giving your players homework to take home with them.
yeah.
And that really resonated with me because I realized like when you play a lot of story driven games, there's often a lot of like pre session work you have to do with each individual player to kind
Hmm.
of make sure that their story goals are being achieved, right?
Right.
Um, and that's a lot of work for the player and the game master to just meet an extra session in between sessions to talk about the character and live in that world.
Hmm.
And I started to notice a trend among my players that a lot of them would just rather show up and improv and make it all up as they go.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I asking them to do homework if what they really are here for is just to kind of figure it out as we go? Like, I shouldn't be asking so much of them, and it would honestly help me out. It would put a lot less pressure on me. Um, and that's like a
Totally.
really, I think, good thing about some games where like they let you just have that space. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'll have to take a look at Five Torches Deep because I started in January. You know, to go back to last week's episode, I started something new, which was designing a game, which I'd never
Hmm.
done before. And I was designing a game to specifically fulfill my need of having something that wasn't that was it was a dungeon crawling game driven by in character story decisions. That was like how I was selling it to myself.
Hmm.
And I was looking for alternative ways to reward people. Like you were talking about how like killing monsters doesn't get you that much XP. You know, talking your way around it might get you more XP, and that was like definitely an element of it. Like I thought a lot about like Breath of the Wild or just how like you don't get experience for killing monsters. You get loot, but you don't get experience. And I
Yeah.
think that that's like a really powerful thing to not reward killing in the same way as you do
Hmm.
in like D&D where it's like a dragon is worth 50,000 experience points. Um, you know, like I feel
Right.
like you can almost quantify like you know that great episode of like that one episode of World of not World of Warcraft, the one episode of South Park where they go grind boars in the woods, you know, just to level up, right? And I think that
Yeah.
like that I think is something that I don't want out of like an old school game, but what I do want are like players sitting around at a table thinking, well, how can we get across this pit? How can we like how does this puzzle work? Because that's something tangible. It's a tangible thing to solve, and they can solve it like through their characters, which whether or not they're comfortable with it, they're role playing in a sense. They just don't realize it, and that I think is like a real gem of an experience that you know you don't really get these days. It feels very binary. Like you're either crunchy
Absolutely.
munchy or you're real story heavy. And I would love something in the middle because I feel like a lot of the best stories are made through the crunchy munchy. Like I think a
I mean,
lot about that campaign that we constantly talk about on this show,
the
you
one with the
know,
lich.
the Immortals with the Lich.
Yep.
And that campaign started very crunchy munchy.
It did. It
And then at a
did.
certain point it became very story driven. And it became like we had goals that were associated with our crunchy munch. And I
Right.
think that
Yeah.
that is like truly that in my opinion is truly the best part about that's what I enjoy the most about these games, you know.
It's discovering the stuff the from what comes out in play, right? Like,
yes.
like
Yes.
truthfully, could you guys in that campaign have come up with backstory motivation better than we accidentally released the Lich? Like,
Exactly. We
you
couldn't
guys did
have.
that by mistake, and you guys did that.
Yeah.
Like, you did it, and now you gotta fix it.
Yeah.
And in the same time, um like I think about like a game your dad actually ran for us. It was a
Oh yeah,
Asian
the
American inspired,
yeah.
or not Asian, an Asian culture
Yeah.
inspired module
Game.
from,
Yeah.
I don't really remember the name of it, but like we had like bare bones characters, you and I.
Yes.
And but by the end it was such an adventure. Like I still remember how excited I was when the villain was escaping and I ran off and jumped with full trust that you would cast Gust to get me the rest of the way.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, or
of
like
that jump,
yeah. Or like I took a freaking finger of death for you.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that was like so fulfilling. And like it's
mm-hmm,
like things like those that kind of action adventure play.
yeah,
I feel like you don't get as much. Cuz it is cuz like we weren't playing with minis, we weren't playing with maps.
mm-mm,
You know,
no.
we were just saying shit that we wanted to do.
I
You know,
remember
you,
we
me
drew a
and
few
Will.
things out just to make sure we had
Yeah.
like it right in our head, but like,
But it wasn't like
you
we
know
relied on these sort of like trappings of 30 feet, half cover. It wasn't
yeah,
like that. And I think like that fluid kind of action adventure experience through a dungeon crawl, because we were basically just climbing a tower, right? That was like the whole adventure. Going
yeah,
to this tower and climbing said tower.
yep.
Um,
And like that was like the adventure. Like the adventure was what we did,
yeah.
um and I want some more of that. I want to find, like you're talking about, that balance. And like,
Yeah.
um because a lot of the games I've been playing lately have been like, here's the backstory, and it's mostly going to be like figuring out how to make everybody's character backstories pay off. That's the
Yeah.
campaign. And
Yeah.
like I'm sitting down with players right now and I'm like, hey, kind of what we're doing is I'm gonna bring you I'm bringing you adventures. I'm bringing adventure modules, and that's kind of what we're doing. Like I know that like it's D&D, you can do anything, but also like we're doing the adventure module. Like we're going
Yeah.
on an adventure together, and this is what I'm bringing to the table. Um, and we'll see what comes out of it. Like, and that's got its own joy. So yeah, it's been interesting to go down this rabbit hole, because it's also where I started. Like you started by playing second edition, I started by playing first.
Yeah.
Um, I started by playing first until my uncle discovered that third edition had come out in the interim between when he had last played and then picked it up to teach me. He
Yeah.
was like, "Oh my god, we have to try this," and he had a great time. But like, um, yeah, so it's and he was still running first edition modules for me through third edition. He was just repackaging them,
Yeah.
doing the translation.
Hmm. We
But
should
it
talk
was
more about this another time.
absolutely. I think we should.
Cause
I
like
think we should jump in and like talk about modules we've gotten to play and like
yeah. Or just
all
like
that good
things that we
stuff.
look forward to in an OSR. Because I think that experience we're talking about is such a nuanced experience that
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
like it warrants like another episode to just dissect that and like why that's so
Yeah.
important to us. Cause like I think it's why often I talk about how like some of the best D&D I ever played was with you, is because like I think a lot of the people at that table, and you and I especially, love that experience.
Totally. And I gotta admit, it was a chore to make that happen with fourth edition. Fourth
Oh
edition was
yeah.
not supportive of that at all.
Yeah.
But that aside, like I also think that there's so much to be um to love in like the indie and the storytelling game, like
Hmm.
movements, right? Like I think at the end of the day, the thing that's just so cool is that the hobby has grown enough such that it can support all these variations on it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I just want people to hear more about like OSR versus storytelling games versus the indie RPG scene versus like how cool 5th edition, like we rag on 5th edition all the time, but actually 5th edition's a really good game. Like
it is.
Like I've played them all and I think it's still the best one.
I
Like
was thinking a lot about how, like, we talked about how introing someone to tabletop games, D&D is the best. And I agree with that sentiment now. Like, having played a handful of D&D games and a handful of, like, other types of games, D&D is still foundational in that regard. It still covers that.
Yeah,
those
which
grounds.
honestly, when it was 4th edition was like the D&D that was getting support, I honestly would have said no, I think you should probably start with Pathfinder. You
Yeah.
know, because that was better and it was still getting support as opposed to D&D 3.5. And then 5th edition came out and I'm like, it's better. It's nice and clean, and it lets you go off in all sorts of directions. If you played 5e, someone can hand you Dungeon World and you'll be like, oh yeah, I get this. Like, cool, I got it, and you could be handed, Morkborg or Five Torches Deep or like Old School
Torchlight.
Essentials and be like, oh yeah, I also get this, or Fall of Magic, even, all of it. And so it's just super cool. But another time.
This is the first tabletop episode we've had in a long time.
It is. I think we need to go. We need to do some more.
Yeah, we definitely do.
Yeah.
But for another time. Thank you all for listening to us talk about one of our favorite hobbies. Again, for the bajillionth time. But
and if you're gonna stick with us, you're gonna listen to it again. God damn it!
Yeah, we can listen to it again. And maybe we'll have more stories after some games we've played next time. But yeah, for now, you can follow the show at Dane and Derek everywhere. Tweet at us or Instagram at us if there's any cool games you've heard of that we may not have played. We'd love to see what games people are playing. And yeah,
hell yeah.
You can see what movies I'm making on my website, Benig-Aiello.com.
You can find my writing at danewrites.com, where you'll find a link to the Substack where I post a little piece of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction every week. You can find links to my podcast, Diceology, where mostly we play storytelling and indie RPGs, and a link out to music I've written in the past.
Yeah. Well, everyone, happy gaming.
Happy gaming. Catch you later.
Catch you later.